I've been asked to talk this morning about securing international business on a shoestring. My name is Lucy Macnamara, and I'm the founder of Aspiga. We are primarily an accessories brand, making leather beaded sandals, here we go, from Kenya, beaded belts, beaded clutch bags. We use small suppliers with small workforces, not large factories, and we get all our goods made in India and Kenya. So our story is all about helping fight poverty through trade and giving much needed jobs, of which we're really proud of. So that's really what the brand is. We have two sides to the business. We have a wholesale side and we have an internet side where we sell the goods online. So business to business and business to consumer. And they take up about 50%, both of them about 50% of our turnover. So at the moment, it's pretty equal in terms of turnover of both sides of the business. So just a little background of how I started. We've been going for 10 years. Feels like a lifetime, but it's actually 10 years. And we launched at Top Drawer in 2005. I went to Kenya in 2003 on holiday. I was working full-time for charity at the time. And I went to Kenya and fell in love with the country, the people, and beautiful beaded sandals. So I came back to England, and for some reason, I'm really still not quite sure why, I ended up buying 250 pairs of sandals and arriving back in England with this delivery. Well, it arrived after me. And by the 10th of September in 2003, I had 10 pairs left. And I sort of thought, blimey, that was quite easy. Everyone I spoke to or saw the sandals wanted a pair. So I didn't do it initially as a business idea. I just did it as getting some money in because I was working full time. But they sold so well. So in 2004, I went out to Kenya and found some suppliers, sourced the products from the right suppliers. And in 2005, we launched at Top Drawer. And it was all on a shoestring. It was all on a tight budget because I had no money. I hadn't gone to the banks. I hadn't got any funding. I just had to take a risk and take a little stand, like, you know, it was 2x3 at one of these shows. And I just thought, if I cover my costs, I'll be happy. And went in with very low expectations. We couldn't even afford shelves, so I got all these twigs and branches from my friend's field in Wales and came back in my car full of all these twigs, and we decorated the stand. We made it look amazing, way better than I do these days. But we spent a whole weekend making it look great, and it all paid off because we took orders all day, every day for 3 days. We got into 40 shops, and we got into Fenwick's at Bond Street. And looking back now, I wish we had shows like that because we can spend half a day with no orders now, sadly. But it was amazing, and we got into 40 stores. So I flew out to Kenya with my sister, and we placed the orders with the suppliers, and I had to go back to work the next day when I got back to England. She sent the products out from her kitchen, but she had a small child. I was still working. I went down to 4 days a week. And then I went down to 3 days a week. And then a year later, in January 2006, I left the job I was doing and just focused on Aspiga full time. And I think for anyone setting up a business, that really worked for me because it brought in a bit of, if anyone, it gives you a bit of income because it's very difficult in the early days to make any money. It really is. I mean, it still is 10 years later, to be honest. But it really was nice to have a salary at the same time, although trying to do two jobs was almost impossible. So in January 2006, I left the company and business in the community where I'd been working, and I set up basically in my kitchen. I had a girl that came and joined me, and I remember thinking at the time, I can't afford any staff, but my chief executive, when I left, gave me a very good quote saying, keep your feet on the ground and your eyes on the horizon, and don't get stuck in and pack all the boxes yourself. Keep looking to the bigger picture. So I did get people in the early days, but I got people in on part-time basis. I wasn't having to pay PAYE, and I think that's quite a good point because paying people full-time salaries with PAYE is quite crippling. So part-time staff to begin with until I built up and knew where I was going. So we started in my kitchen, and there ended up being 3 or 4 of us to the stage where no one could move, tripping over wires, etc. So we got a little office, and we started working from there. And what else did we do on tight budget? I think from day one, I didn't spend much money. I just talked to a lot of people at shows like this, as everyone's out there to help. There's so many people that will share ideas, give you printers' numbers, give you suggestions. And for me, talking to people was invaluable. People who've been through it before, people who have got a little bit of advice, people who say to you, well, this show's better for you. Because I didn't know anything. I'd never worked in retail. I'd never worked in fashion. So I was learning. That's how we started, just on a tight budget with a good product, I suppose. From day one, people liked the product. And we were lucky that the product was always popular. So the product was never really the most difficult thing to sell. It was getting the infrastructure in place that was difficult. So what I learned along the way, so much, I'm still learning. As I said, I didn't come from a background of fashion. But I think this is a really good quote that I'd like to read out because it's so true in my case. Business is many things, the least of which is the balance sheet. It is fluid, ever-changing, living thing, sometimes building to great peaks, sometimes falling to crumbled lumps. The soul of a business is a curious alchemy of needs, desires, greed, and gratifications, mixed together with selflessness, sacrifices, and personal contributions far beyond material rewards. That was from Harold Green, who was the president of ITT Corporation in America. But I think the point about that is the financial rewards are quite small to begin with. It takes a long time to make any money. So you have to really love what you're doing. You have to love a lot about the job because it takes everything out of you. It's really, really hard work. So I think you have to go into it wanting to make money and being hungry to make money, but you have to love what you're doing and be proud of what you're doing. And for me, trying to give jobs to developing countries was key, and also loving the product was key. So those are one of the things I learned along the way. Cash is king, really, really important. The more, the bigger the business gets, the more important, because whatever orders you've got coming in, if you don't have the money in the bank account to be able to pay for things that month, you can go bankrupt. And my bank manager, my father, always saying to me, forget what's happening at the end of the year, what's in your bank right now? You know, what's your cash flow? And now at the stage where we are, which I forgot to say, so we started in 2005 at that stage, we're now, 10 years later, over £1 million turnover with selling globally. We've got distributors in Spain, Italy, France, Israel, United States, and agents in Germany and France. And we're growing at 20% a year. It's hard work, but that's where we are presently. The bigger you get, the more important the cash flow is. So now we have to do cash flow forecasts every month. Get a good bank manager. And if you don't shop around, because the first few bank managers I went to, I didn't like and moved on. They were sort of 18-year-olds because when you're a small business, that you get the lowest of the low in the bank, and they don't really know how to run a small business. So shop around till you're really happy. I've now got a great bank manager who's used to much bigger businesses than me, so he's really quite useful. But feel happy with your bank. Make sure they understand you, understand retail, understand what you're trying to achieve. There is a lot of help and money out there to be found with the people like UKTI and the British Footwear Association, in my case, have been fantastic. You can get grants to exhibit in Europe. You can get mentoring advice. You can get help and advice. There is a lot more support and advice out there if you look around, of which I didn't really do in the early days. And also, I think there's money coming in from Europe. And the Federation of Small Business was very useful for me because they're a voice for small businesses. And you can get things like templates for work contracts, for offering jobs to begin with, and how to discipline people. And there's free legal advice at the end of a phone call. So that I found really useful. And I feel we should be supporting someone who's trying to give us all a voice. So Federation of Small Businesses, it was good for me. Trust your gut instinct. I think you know better than a lot of other people that maybe in my case, I ask advice for sometimes, and I think I went into this business never believing that what I might achieve. And so a lot of the time I've got a gut feeling, and yet sometimes I don't go with it, which in hindsight, if I could step back 10 years, I would trust myself more. In my case, certainly, never take your supplier's word for it in terms of delivery dates. They never deliver on time. You know, it's dealing with the countries I deal with anyway. Factor in delays. You just have to factor in delays, and you have to be like a terrier, like my little Jack Russell, the whole time, chasing. You never just say, you know, one thing in September and then believe it's going to arrive in February. It just doesn't, unless you put a lot of time to keeping up the communication. Have a strategic plan and try to keep to it. In my case, I don't think I had either. But be prepared to accept change, because every day something else is thrown at you. You know, it's just fluid. It really is very fluid. Get a good mentor if you can. It's made such a difference to me. I think if you have a business partner, that's great. You might not need a mentor, but I would suggest finding a mentor that's in your industry that you look up to, that has experience in your sector and has time to give you. Because in my case, I was really, really lucky. I got introduced to the ex-chief executive of Monsoon, who was just phenomenal. He was such a lovely guy. And I think that in the early years, I would have most probably closed my business if it hadn't been for him, because just being able to pick up the phone and ask someone that knew what they were talking about, that reassured me. For example, one time I went to the bank to ask for a loan. The bank manager said, I don't know why you're running this business. You didn't make money last year. You're not forecast to make money this year, and was so dismissive. And I picked up the phone to the bank manager, to my mentor, and he was just like, forget it. Bank managers don't know how to run businesses. That's why they're he wasn't even a bank manager, just a bank guy. So he really, really was amazing to me, and I would urge anyone to get a mentor. I think they're fantastic, but you've got to click with them. They've got to click with you, and you've got to. I think it helps that they're in the industry that you're in. Be prepared for knockbacks and setbacks, because it happens frequently. In my case, quite often, and sometimes you just wonder why you're doing it, but it is worthwhile in the end, I think. It's not for the faint-hearted. It's long hours. You set your own business up thinking, great, I'll be my own boss, I'll have more holidays, etc., etc., and it's quite the reverse. If you do have a holiday, if you're like me, you're on the BlackBerry or the iPhone all the time. So it's quite the reverse, but hopefully the long-term game plan, it will all be worth it. So if I could start all over again, what would I do differently? In my case, loads, I'm afraid. I wouldn't set up a footwear business. There's too many sizes, and I didn't realize this until I'd been going for about 3 years. The Dragon's Den once, I saw one of their shows, and the guy said, we're not investing. It was a brilliant brand. And they said, we're not investing because footwear is just a nightmare. You can never make money in it. I have to have size 36 to 42 or 43. And I've got so much stock, that's where most of my money's tied up, and yet you still don't have the one size that someone wants. So I'd go for one size fits all. I'd go for scarves, hats, jewelry, bags, something, just not footwear. I would have done a European trade show earlier. This is all great, but doing the European ones, Milan and France, you get so many more international buyers. So going to my point about securing international business. The shows in Paris for me are amazing. You get the Japanese turning up, you get Americans turning up. So I would have tried to have done a European show earlier. I did try, and I got turned away. And that's another thing about starting out. Just don't give up. You just have to keep applying and keep trying. So yeah, the European trade shows are great. They're certainly great for us. I think I would have started with a partner if I could have done. Someone who had a different skill set to me, because it's lonely at times, and it's very difficult. And I'm a typical entrepreneur, which is can do 1,000 things at once, don't concentrate much, juggle all the time, and therefore systems, organization, all of that I'm not great at. So if I'd had a partner who could pick up all the pieces, it would have been great, who loves all the organisation and systems, because I think I've made life quite difficult for myself and my team. On that subject, have regular team meetings, have one-to-ones, set targets. There's a thing called a daily huddle, which is a 5-minute meeting every day with your team just around the desk to all make sure you're all on the same page. I would have planned more. What is your game plan? What do you want from your business now? What do you want in 3 years' time? And what do you want in 10 years' time? I think I always just never really thought of the bigger picture. I just thought of tomorrow and the next day. And it's only been the last 5 years I've been starting to think about who are we and what are we trying to achieve and what do we want in the next 5 years and what do I want in the next 10 years. So starting with that plan, I think, would be quite beneficial. I would have also employed QC and agents on the ground way before I did. I thought, at the time, 5% of an order seems a lot of money to give to someone to oversee your products. But actually, it's money well spent, because when the products all come wrong, which we've had on a number of occasions, to try to send them back to the country is impossible. The suppliers don't want to take the blame. It's really expensive. So I would definitely pay for the QC people on the ground. And if I could do things differently, I'm afraid I wouldn't be dealing with suppliers in developing worlds. It really has nearly killed me. And however much, the best will in the world is different cultures, different standards, different way of working. They never change. And however much, I go out there 3 times a year. I'm flying to India this afternoon. You think you've cracked it. You get on the plane and you come home and you think, oh, I'm so glad I went. It was so worthwhile. They've promised they're going to do this, this, and this. Next delivery, nothing changes. It is the way it is. And I think starting small was great, and starting on the wholesale side, so that's where you get your money coming in, about having to, because starting on the internet side is more difficult. You need funding to buy websites, buy stuff. But we were lucky in one respect because we could get small minimums from these small suppliers. But in hindsight, I think I would have taken the plunge and gone for more sophisticated factories with bigger minimums to get proper deliveries on time and good quality goods. So I think I've done everything the wrong way. But we're kind of there, not yet. We're getting there, and we're growing at 20%. But it's really, really hard work. So, and the last thing I'd just say is, the thing that I haven't done, I wouldn't do differently, is get a great team, get good, young, they don't have to be young, but they have to be committed members of staff. I've been so lucky because all the girls that have worked for me are so talented, driven, committed. They can't go and take lunch and swan around. Well, they can, but they don't. They really work hard. And I think you have to have people that are passionate as you, because as a small business, you just can't have people that aren't passionate about your brand. In my case, you can't, because it's not easy. And so I think, I get, we're just putting some adverts up for some staff and interns at the moment. And if people don't even mention Aspiga in their covering letter, they just have put an advert in, I'm not interested. They've got to want to work for your company. And I'm really lucky, and that's one of the things I love most about my job is the girls I work with. They're fantastic. Every time one leaves, I almost cry, or I do cry, which is a bit embarrassing in front of the whole office. But the only problem is with young, dedicated staff, they do move on every 2-3 years. But they're fantastic while they work for you. So get a good team behind you or with you. And I think that's most of it. Only another quote that I love, which I think is true: if you don't know where you're going, you'll probably end up somewhere else. And I think that goes back to the strategic plan and what you want to achieve, because it's true, you need to know where you're going and then try to keep on that track.